that the narrative isn't being told on mainstream media. It's not being told by the establishment media. It's being told really on social media. For us, it's the Muslim regimes. Why have you failed in your duty? I continue to essentially stick to what I believe to be the Palestinian narrative, which is an Islamic cause, but not to the exclusion of other faiths.
How do Palestinians hold strategic dependence on Iran alongside genuine distrust of the regime?
The UN has how many resolutions in favour of Palestine in terms of the occupation of 67? How many in favour of Kashmir against the Indian occupation? There's many. Have they ever been implemented? Have they ever been enforced? How can you talk about Palestine if you then don't talk about the affairs of Kashmir and the Rohingya and the Uyghurs? And how do you prioritise one over another?
Assalamu alaikum, brother. Thank you for being here with me today.
Wa alaikum salam. It's a pleasure.
It's also, I should also mention to people that I am a big fan of yours, not just because you're a Palestinian, but also for the fact that there is certain clarity that you have that maybe other people don't, or at least they gloss over and they haven't quite got into it, which we'll talk a little about later. I think one of the first things I want to discuss is the fact that, considering that you're part of Narrative House, and I have the privilege of hosting you on this podcast. Talk to me about how you started that out. What was the purpose of it? When did you start it, and how did it evolve into what it is today?
Yeah, so in terms of my personal connection to Narrative House, it actually started during the genocide. So obviously there was a huge amount of political activity with the live stream genocide taking place in Gaza. And so I was asked if I would come in actually on the show to talk about my own personal connection to Palestine and my dad's journey really as a Nakba survivor. So that's how it started off. And actually off the back of that, they asked me if I could actually host some of the podcasts, and I did do that, and actually just really evolved from there. But obviously in terms of the background, I have been involved in activism and Islamic discussions, talks, protests, etc. But to be on a podcast, that was the first time.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, I think you've done pretty well, and it's built up pretty successfully. Now, somebody that's in the media, we can't avoid the discussion of 200 Palestinian journalists and let's even call them citizen journalists that have been massacred, assassinated in Palestine. How does that impact the work that other people are doing when it comes to representing the Palestinian movement, but more importantly the narrative that should be coming out from the ground that is now being silenced?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably certainly a shocking statistic. As you say, more than 200 people, some people put it over 250. And in fact, Lebanon has, I think, seen something like 14 journalists murdered as well. One of them quite explicitly assassinated a sister, Fatima, and her brother, because she was actually carrying a narrative against the Zionist entity. So it's a really huge responsibility, I think, for all of us to be their mouthpieces. What we've seen, I think, particularly in the last 2.5 years, is that the narrative isn't being told on mainstream media. It's not being told by the establishment media. It's being told really on social media. So, subhanAllah, those citizens and journalists, as you mentioned, they were reporting to us so that we could be their mouthpieces across the world. Whether it was on TikTok, Instagram.
It's a huge burden then.
Huge burden. I think we are all responsible for carrying that message. So subhanAllah, the fact that they're risking their lives to carry out reporting in a war zone, I think we have then an obligation to carry that message and amplify it.
Yeah. You see, it's a part of that solidarity idea that we have. If we talk a little bit more about solidarity, it's unfortunate to say that the regional Arab countries have pretty much abandoned. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misrepresenting, but it looks like that they've abandoned the Palestinians, and there's no symbolic weight even behind Palestine or any narrative around it, let alone the action. But even the narrative, it seems to be, I mean, not even diluting. It seems to be dismissive of it completely and trying to reorganize that narrative. What is so problematic about representing the Palestinians truly and honestly for the regional Arabian leaders?
So I always separate, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's the leaders and the regimes. I think the people are completely shocked about the events that have taken place recently, but also in terms of the occupation that's existed for almost 80 years. But unfortunately, the regimes are really there as the first line of defense for the occupation. And that's proven in the fact that so many people have actually been martyred in the neighboring countries. I really do remind people to follow events there. In Jordan, several people have been murdered by the regime for standing in solidarity with Palestine. Egypt, many people are locked up across the Khalij. So unfortunately, the regimes play a pivotal role in actually defending the occupation. So for us, really, we have to turn our attention to those regimes. Too much attention a lot of the time is placed on occupation, the Zionist occupation, but they're doing what we expect them to do.
Exactly.
They're enemies who came and ethnically cleansed, murdered the people of Palestine, the indigenous people of Palestine. So we're expecting them to do that as kind of a very open enemy.
It's their job.
That is their job. And the US, who backs them, has been their supporter for decades. So for us, it's the Muslim regimes. Why have you failed in your duty? Why do you continue to trade? Why do you continue to have diplomatic relations? Why do you persecute your own people who stand in solidarity with the Palestinian cause? So really, I think the biggest issue that the Muslim world is facing is the lack of leadership, sincere leadership.
As we're talking about leadership, there are certain countries, international solidarity that's come out for the Palestinians, including from the Muslim world. Has that been detrimental, or has it helped in framing the cause? Because on the one side you have, particularly in the West, people are trying to frame it as an anti-Zionist, anti-occupation, anti-Western imperialism hegemony cause, whereas from the Muslim world it's more about the Islamic identity. Which is more problematic, or which has been more successful, or what is it that the Palestinians actually want to be represented?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you cannot remove the left, or even for that matter, so even people from the right now are talking about Palestine and anti-Zionist movements. How does one do justice to the Palestinian cause without alienating allies?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. I think overall it's been beneficial. It's put Palestine and the occupation on the map. It's also shifted the view of Zionism being a positive force for good in the West to one that's actually considered extremely evil. And the fact that the US is now seeing opinion polls where more than 60% of people see Israel as detrimental to US interests, that's a real massive shift from where it was over 2.5 years ago. Now, I think this point is really important. What is the cause? And this does get lost. I generally have spoken, in fact, I just spoke at a church just a few minutes from here. I met with a local MP, and I've spoken at many events where, let's call them left-leaning, open to Muslims and non-Muslims. And I continue to essentially stick to what I believe to be the Palestinian narrative, which is an Islamic cause, but not to the exclusion of other faiths. And this is a really important point, because usually they like to classify it as Muslims to the exclusion of Christians or Jews or anyone else for that matter.
So you offer the caveat that is not at the cost of other faiths.
Exactly. In fact, Islam has been the only religion in that region to bring peace and security to the people of Palestine and to the wider region. I mean, just look at the evidence. 80 years of Jewish Zionist rule, and there's been massacres, ethnic cleansing, murder, and we know the Crusaders left bloodshed across the region for about 100 years. So actually, if you look at the 40 and 100 years since Islam came to that land, where have we actually seen peace and security except under Islamic rule?
Absolutely.
So it's not to the exclusion of Christians and Jews. And one really excellent example is Gaza. Gaza was always shown as this, it's only a small, essentially extremist hotbed for Muslims, when in fact there were over 1,000 Christians who lived there. 3 churches, the third oldest church in the entire world, is in Gaza. So they continue to live under these so-called Islamic fanatics. How is that the case?
And the destruction of that church wasn't by the
destruction of the
Muslims.
3 churches all destroyed. Many Christians murdered during the genocide.
And we should specifically say that it wasn't done by Muslims.
Absolutely.
It was done specifically by the Zionist regime.
So you can see how Christians actually feel solidarity and safe with their Muslim counterparts. So I think we need to shatter some of those myths. But yes, definitely, I think we need to have our own vision for Palestine, for all our causes. And actually, Islam offers a solution for humanity that is very distinct from the current corruption that we see reigning across the world.
Now that we're talking about the region, we can't avoid the discussion of Iran. It's open knowledge that Iran funded Hamas for large parts of history. But we also know that many Iranians in a particular stadium in 2023, I think, they were chanting against Palestine. Now, as a Palestinian or people that are supporting Palestine, how do Palestinians hold strategic dependence on Iran alongside genuine distrust of the regime?
Yeah. Again, you've mentioned the regime, and I think it's important to distinguish between the people and their sentiments. And even we know that there is a split within Iranian society. It's not all pro-Palestinian and pro-Islamic. There are very notable secular elements within that regime, within the population, who do not feel that Iran should be putting its head on the neck, on the line, or its neck on the line for the Palestinian cause. They believe that it should be purely nationalistic. But there is obviously a strong movement that supports Palestine. And I remember seeing a video during the bombing of Iran where a woman said, you know, what is this small sacrifice compared to what the Palestinians have sacrificed for the last 2.5 years? Are my children more important than them? So that's the sentiment, I think, of the vast majority of the population. And that exists in Lebanon, that exists across the region, and beyond that, actually. I think it's important to understand that Iran did not act to stop this genocide. And I'm just going to say it bluntly. So if you believe you have the capability to strike at the heart of a regime that is committing genocide, and you only choose to do that when you come under attack, then it shows that this is not what we call true brotherhood. But that's not unexpected. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, this is the way our land has been carved up.
Exactly. It's geopolitics.
Exactly. So every country is looking for their own national interests. You can see Jordan is going even further than that. It intercepts the missiles heading towards the Zionists at the expense of their own civilian population, who then have to deal with the fragments of missiles falling on their heads. And we see in Egypt that they will not move even an inch to protect the Palestinian people. So it's not something unique to Iran. Ultimately, these regimes have never served the interests of the Ummah or their own people. So I think that point has to be at the forefront of our minds. And that's what I would even apply this discussion to any Muslim country across the world, whether it's in the Arab world or non-Arab world. The regimes do not see the Muslim interests as their interests. They're elites. They look after their own interests to line their pockets, unfortunately, the majority of the time, and to self-preservation, essentially.
You touched on something that's very important to me personally, and it's something that we've discussed in the past. And we were in an event together in Palestine House, if you remember, and I often refer to the statement that you made because, and I'm ashamed to say that it was profound to me because it should have been obvious. And I mentioned this recently as well. What is the Ummah? When we talk about, and you're right, leadership should be distinguished from the public, but at the same time, it's the public that put those leaders in place, or they can bring them down. That's how it should be in theory.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the Ummah, what is it supposed to look like? At least from an oppressed person, from being from Kashmir, I know what I believe, but as a Palestinian whose people has been, and I hate to say this in front of a Palestinian, but whose people and family and nation has been destroyed in front of his eyes, what is the concept of Ummah for you, and how has that concept failed you?
Yeah.
Or has it succeeded?
No, I think we're not living up to our obligations as an Ummah, whether in terms of even how we define it, even where we see our responsibility to it, and definitely through our actions we're failing. There's an interesting statement that Palestinians make. They say the word qadiyya. Qadiyya means issue. So if you say to a Palestinian, the qadiyya, al-qadiyya, they'll know exactly what you mean. It means the Palestinian cause. So if you're at any event, any talk, anything, they go, the qadiyya. I was never taught that. My dad never taught me that the qadiyya was Palestine. He taught me the qadiyya was your deen. And that then branches off into many responsibilities. That means you're responsible for the occupation of Palestine. You have a duty towards the Muslims in Kashmir, towards the Muslims of the Uyghurs, towards the Muslims who've been genocided in Rakhine State by the Burmese. We're talking about a genocide that's complete. We're talking about a genocide that's still ongoing in Gaza, but there's one that's already complete.
Exactly.
A population of about 2.5 million, very similar, Muslim population, targeted for their faith, forced out of their lands. More than, I believe, 3/4 are now refugees in Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia. So that genocide is complete, but it wasn't a live stream genocide. We got snippets of it here and there. And that's maybe one fundamental difference, but there is a completely other cause, which is, unfortunately, we don't value the cause of our Rohingya brothers in the same way we do the Palestinian brothers. So if my qadiyya is Islam, then I understand Ummah. What does it really mean? So if a Palestinian is now coming out and marching for Palestine, but didn't march for the Uyghurs, and didn't come out for when Pakistan was attacked and Afghanistan was attacked over 20 years ago, and didn't come out for Iraq and Syria, and didn't come out for Kashmir and Sudan, then you have to ask yourself, what does Ummah mean to you?
Yes.
So that was how I was taught Ummah. Ummah was never about Palestine as a cause. It was about our cause collectively and all the responsibilities that come with that, whether it's your Muslim brothers and sisters or whether it's your non-Muslim neighbors. I mean, ultimately, we talked about Palestine. 10% of Palestine, or even more, it was about 15% actually, and when the British occupied Palestine, that were Christian. So how did they exist all those centuries? So actually, we have a much bigger responsibility as Muslims, and we failed in that. But that's because our mindset has changed. We're now very much about nationalistic, solutions and duties, when we need to widen that discussion and say, actually, our qadiyya is Islam.
So you would say that we especially in the West, that we use the term ummah very liberally and casually without understanding what it actually should mean and entail.
I do, and I also think one issue that I've raised in a talk recently, that when it comes to the clash between your cause and another cause, you really see people's real beliefs and real views. I'll give you an example. Early on in the genocide, I think I spoke out against China, and someone said, don't do that. China is at least semi-pro-Palestinian. It's not like the Americans in the West. I said, so I'll ignore the suffering of our Uyghur brothers and sisters because of their support for Palestine, their so-called support for Palestine. I said, no, that doesn't work like that. And even people wanting to whitewash Iran's crimes in Syria. I'm very open about that. But I distinguish between the regimes and the people. I see the things different. The regime acts not for the interest of the people in this deen. So I think we need to really challenge ourselves a little bit more about the meaning of ummah.
Now that there's this so-called ceasefire that was brokered, and Pakistan was in the midst of it, no Palestinian was at the table. This often happens in history, that people are negotiating and the primary party never there. How do you see any discussions happening in the future without Palestinians front and center? And when we talk about Palestinians front and center, who exactly are we talking about?
So this is where I will diverge from many Palestinians. I don't believe it's necessary that we needed Palestinians at the table, but we needed people who represented this ummah at the table. And unfortunately, they don't.
See, even that's profound. That as a Palestinian whose people are being massacred, you still are staunchly advocate
absolutely
that the ummatic leaders should be there. It doesn't have to be a Palestinian itself.
If Egypt walked into Palestine and liberated it tomorrow, I'd be extremely happy. Wow. If Jordan took that responsibility, I'd be extremely happy. And that was our mindset previously, because actually who were the last guardians of Palestine? The Ottomans. The Ottomans were Turks, not Arabs. But actually, would anyone not want to go back to that time?
Of course, exactly.
Where we actually had some honor and some dignity, and actually all the people of different faiths lived in harmony and peace.
And flourished,
So for me, as soon as we make it a Palestinian cause, and I do have these disagreements with Palestinian activists, I do have to remind them that we don't believe in this Palestinian state. And what do we want to aspire to? To another small, weak state? That's another question that we need to ask ourselves.
That's a very good point.
Unfortunately, that's if you've limited your mindset to what you see today, which is fragmented, weak states, then that's the solution that you're going to look for. Who's going to represent the Palestinians? But actually, the Palestinians should be seen as part of a much, much bigger, stronger community, which is a Muslim ummah, a real Muslim ummah.
So how does that work? So let's actually go down this rabbit hole, simply because I think a lot of the times we talk about what the issues are. What are the solutions for this? If you had to envision, let's say that you had the power to create the vision for Palestine for the next year, 5 years, 10 years, how would that look? How would you create it?
So again, we need to take a step back. If we look at it as Palestine only, we're falling into that same error again, where we're saying, we're going to solve the Palestinian problem in the current, take into account the current restrictions or limitations, which is these nationalistic entities and everyone vying for their own control and power. I think we need to take a step back. Should the Ummah be operating in this fashion? And actually, let me answer a more important point. What the solution is definitely not what we're doing now. The UN has actually ensured the occupation of Palestine. The UN, whatever statements it makes about Palestine and Kashmir, takes no serious action against it. The ICJ, ICC can issue whatever they want in terms of warrants and statements. But in reality, when America can go and sanction the same judges who passed those judgments, then you know that the solution is not going to come from those institutions. That's clear. So we then have to ask, what is the solution for any of these occupations?
So you're saying challenge the existing status quo and the power dynamics that exist in the world?
We have to. We have to, because they fail their own people. It's not like we're living in a situation where the world is flourishing. The world is facing economic crises. The world is, has lost complete belief in any of the narratives. Just a really interesting video I saw the other day about the so-called Trump assassination. 420,000 likes, millions of views on this video. And he goes, no one believes it. He goes, do you really think anyone believes any of the news coming out anymore? And it just made me think there is no belief anymore in this system on any level, politically, socially, economically, in terms of delivering solutions. So as Muslims, we should say, hang on, don't we have a role to play in this world? Because we did play a role previously. We were at the table. That's who we need at the table, not the Palestinians. We need Muslims to be at the table. And unfortunately, we're not at the table. So we have a big challenge. We have a huge task ahead of us, really. And it's not going to be unpicked by understanding the Palestinian problem or the Kashmiri problem or the Rohingya problem or the Uyghur problem. It has to really go much, much deeper and say, what future do the Muslims envisage?
I'm going to challenge you a little bit on this because we've discussed how the people are very different to the leadership that's there. And to create such an idea and then implement it would require leadership.
Yes.
So it's kind of we're in a vicious cycle here. So how do we change that? So essentially, we're not talking about the liberation of lands first. We're talking about the reconstitution of the mind as well as the structures of power that exist within Muslim lands. So how do we do that?
It's huge. I mean, it's a huge struggle, really. And I think we're already in that struggle. And in fact, one of the, I think, beneficial things that came out of Gaza, which sounds crazy to say after so many people have been mass murdered and the whole strip has been destroyed, is that there has been an awakening. Many people have come out. Actually, social media has changed dramatically, where people now pin the blame on where it should be really placed, which is the leadership, the regimes. Now, changing that is very difficult. I'm not here to say there's a magic pill and we apply it and somehow we change the affairs of the Muslim world. But I can tell you it starts by changing the affairs of the Muslim world.
Absolutely.
One of the really lovely stories I heard in one of the talks I attended was about the time of occupation under the Crusades of Palestine and that region. And the first people to rise up were the poets. And the poets tried to awaken people's feelings about this occupation. How can you rest at night when you see this occupation? How can you rest at night when you see your brothers and sisters being murdered? And that applies to any of the occupations. That's why we should always link back to any of the atrocities, any of the calamities befalling the Ummah, so that they feel that connection. Then you say, okay, so how do you solve that? Well, there is a solution. How do we get to that? It's very difficult because everything is being done, and I mean everything is being done across the globe to prevent that from happening. Because when you look at the world today, it's being dominated by a certain class. Now they've been given the name the Epstein class. But these elites who look after their interests, this huge industry of the military and arms industry, social media, the media in general, and they serve a certain purpose, which is maintaining their status quo. Islam actually offers a complete alternative. But it says actually, no, there should be fairness in society. There should be a distribution of wealth. There should be ensuring that the leadership is held to account and all of these things, when in fact, no way will they allow that to return without a struggle. So the regimes don't act independently. So we really do need to change that belief that these current regimes will bring us any good. Whether that means 5, 10, 20, 30 years before we see real change, I don't know. But that has to be the direction of travel. That has to be where we call for real change.
Sometimes, not to play devil's advocate, and I hate to use that term, but there is geopolitics and statecraft works at a level that most people would find complex or difficult to understand. And the example that you gave, for example, Erdogan, is the fact that living in the real world, these are the arguments that we often hear.
I know the arguments.
Living in the real world, there are limitations of how much we can do and what we can do. There are certain sacrifices that we have to make for the greater good. And they all claim that it's a bigger picture, it's a long-term vision. How do you respond to the statements made by people that are in support of leaders that claim that there is a long-term vision and these are small sacrifices we need to make?
Yeah. It's funny because we wouldn't use that same pragmatism when it comes to other aspects of our deen. So that's an interesting point. So do you separate the political dimension of Islam from your religious obligation, from your spiritual? I think we do, and that's an unfortunate situation because that means we never really truly looked at Islamic solutions. But also, if you look at the early Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ, they had a mission, and that mission would sound outlandish if we heard it today. So, what, from a small city, you're going to then take over the Arab Peninsula, and then you're going to spread Islam to the world, and you're going to bring all these cultures and different languages and different skin colors and different backgrounds together under one unified Islamic leadership. You'd be like, oh, you're crazy. What are you talking about? But that vision is what they work towards. Now, am I saying that vision is going to just come about like that? No, not at all. But we should be developing in the mindset of Muslims that they have something better to aspire to than working within a current system that looks to restrain them and doesn't look to actually bring about any real change. Because what we can see in countries like Egypt and countries like Jordan and countries even like Pakistan is that they're acting as the best that they can do is act as mediators for the West. But they're not weak countries. They have resources. They have strong militaries. But they never see themselves in a position of leadership. So even these regimes don't see themselves.
Allyship between the Muslim countries would be able to successfully challenge the current world powers.
Well, I mean, we have way more in common than the European Union. We share, we have a true belief that we all believe in, and yet they are working towards greater unity and greater, economic cohesion and cooperation. But yet we are always looking at how can we divide ourselves further. Oh, so Yemen, can we divide that more? Sudan, can we divide that more? Well, obviously it's not us. We know it's not the people. We know that there are people designing those plans, from foreign capitals. But ultimately we're falling for those traps. So a country like Sudan that was extremely powerful and extremely rich lost South Sudan, which actually had the largest amounts of oil reserves. So a country that could have flourished for all its citizens, including the Christian population, now sees itself in the civil war that's even going to try and divide it out further into different regions like Darfur, for example. So we're not exactly moving in the right direction here. So as an ummah, we need to be the ones calling for these change, for real change. It's not an easy task. I think the problem is sometimes it's simplified, it's very romantic. We call for Islam, everyone come together. Look at Salahuddin Ayyubi's journey. Over 3 decades before he actually realized his goal of liberating Al-Aqsa. But look at how long he worked in the background. Look at the shuyukh who worked at creating madaris. Look at the challenges and the change he made in Egypt and uniting the people. So I think, he was a real statesman. But he worked towards that unity. And I think that's important. And I'm not going to now say that everything that all of these previous examples did was perfect and according to Islam. But I don't believe that the current leadership actually aspires to those changes. And that's the big difference here. We're not really seeing any example of these people working towards real change.
If, the OIC and whatnot, and they have these discussions there, and ultimately it doesn't conclude to any tangible change. There was a thought that maybe somebody like myself would have had that alliances of Muslims in Muslim lands at grassroots level that eventually change the structures over time, especially for the future. This is not a new idea. It's something that I'm actually talking about that happened in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And these are people that we all know. I'll give you one example. There was a fraternity of these brothers that included people like Anwar Ibrahim, President Erdogan, and a few others. I'm not going to mention any others' names because these two people are actually, everybody knows that they're friends. And they wanted this Islamic revival. And then when they get into power, suddenly things start to shift. And they say that, the real world politics is slightly different. One of the things that I believe and strongly believe in, and I hope that I believe in it, is that strong, is the fact that if you stick to your guns, you may face the wrath and sticks and stones and the thorns of the West, but in the long term, showing alliance with your nation of Muslims will reap better reward. But one of the hindrances of that is always going to be external forces that, at least if you don't perceive it, that everybody else perceives, that they are much, much stronger and more united, specifically because their vision is to eradicate Islam and the Muslim identity. As you rightly said, because they see it as a threat. If we start bringing in the Islamic principles of economics, of society, culture, whatever it may be, it puts a threat to their order of control around the world. And I agree with you, 20, 30 years, 100%, it will take at least that much time just to institutionalize the vision.
Mm.
But then what are the threats to that in terms of, do you really believe that, let's take the last couple of years, for example. And yes, there are lots of allies in regards to Palestine. Do you believe those allies could turn into allies for the Islamic revival, Islamic cause?
So,
is it possible that
yeah.
we could convince these people
Mm.
that believe in anti-Zionism, anti-hegemony, anti-capitalist, and we know what kind of class that is, can we turn them towards not just pro-Palestine, but pro-Islamic revival by convincing them somehow that it's not just the human rights aspect, but it's the principles of what we believe in that also serve your interests as well?
Yeah. I just want to answer your question by giving an example of Egypt. So, first of all, it doesn't mean that Ummah is miles away from this thinking, but there are many obstacles to overcome. So I'll just give you an example. When they removed Mubarak, they had elections a year, 2 years later, and we know that Hussain came in, Morsi came in, and actually over 50% of the vote was for an Islamic-leaning government. Unfortunately, Morsi was deposed very quickly and very easily, and the key issue that he didn't have the army on side. So Sisi was essentially placed there to essentially overthrow him. So we went back to a military-led regime. So Mubarak had led for, 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Essentially Sisi came back to take power, and actually more brutally than Mubarak even did in terms of the massacres he committed in just a few days. That means that the Egyptian people had the aspiration for real change. They wanted to see real change. They didn't want, a Mubarak-type government. They didn't want a secular-type government. And they saw that there was potentially change through Morsi. But not having power means that you're always at the whim of these the powerful
forces,
and the external forces essentially use the army to do their job. So we do have the ingredients to bring change in our lands, but we are not focusing our efforts on the right people, I feel. We do need to have the influentials, the scholars, the thinkers, the journalists, the military to understand this message. And I think that part can't be ignored, because these current regimes are there to ensure that they remain in power. I feel that it's not just calling upon the masses. It's not just an idea of Ummah. They need to see something more practical. Like, how would Islamic leadership come about? And this part is not really discussed. We feel that I feel people stop at, talking about very nice ideas about Ummah and Islamic leadership, and look at the examples of the Sahaba.
Romanticizing it.
Yeah, it's like romanticizing it. But actually look at the history. Yeah. Look at the history of the military. And I do this actually, which a lot of people don't know, is that we have had many great examples of generals who've fought for the sake of this Ummah. Because ultimately they're Muslim, they believe in this cause. But they're trained and they're brought up in such a way that they believe they're only there to serve a certain agenda of their regimes, or to go and get their UN money when they serve as, with their blue helmets, etc. We need to change that mentality. So I just think we need to widen the discussion to say, politically, how do you gain power over your own lands? Because what we've seen, especially in the last few years, is if you don't have power, you're not at the table. Now, in terms of the other question about, are we really so weak when it comes to facing an external threat? Well, just look at Iran. I think it's a really interesting case study. 40 days, America and its Zionist ally pummeled it.
Yeah.
I mean, they threw everything at it.
And the funny thing is, they're the ones that suffered more
Essentially,
than Iran.
they were the ones desperate for the kind of ceasefire. They went through Pakistan to try and broker one. And in fact, they initially accepted Iran's demands because they just wanted to end it. Yeah. Trump was under huge pressure. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. Tel Aviv is still being bombed. American bases don't seem so strong anymore.
Oil prices.
So if you ask people just 2 years ago, what do you think of America's presence in the Middle East? Oh, it's overwhelming. They control everything. They control all the waterways. They control the bases. We have no chance of actually breathing. But actually, what we saw in just 40 days of a country that's, I would say, strong, but not necessarily stronger than Pakistan. Certainly, Pakistan is the strongest Muslim military with nuclear weapons. Egypt, Turkey. And Turkey now is being threatened by the Zionists to be next on their list. So we actually have the ability to respond to aggression. But if you don't have the mentality to face it, then all you will ever do is say, "Oh, we have to, act within the political framework," and ultimately you're never going to move away from that dependency on the West. It does mean potential challenge, and what did the Prophet ﷺ show us? That you have to face challenges. Yes. Just recently, actually, the anniversary of the Battle of Khandaq happened, the Battle of the Trench. So this is where the Prophet ﷺ faced all the tribes who came to depose him in Medina. So if we're not going to take those examples of the seerah, if we're going to take them as just stories, then they will have no relevance. But if we take them as real examples of what political leadership means, then I think we need to ask ourselves, are we ever going to move away from this if we don't face the challenge from the West?
Absolutely. If I can come back a little bit closer to home, home means Gaza. There are many people that have been talking about the legitimacy for armed resistance and international law and whatever acceptability there is. And if we just bypass that for a moment, can we talk about its achievements, its hindrance, its successes, its relevance today? Not within international the legal framework or political framework, but in terms of its achievements and potential to actually conclude this mess into success.
If you had asked me this question several years ago, I might have been not so... I may have been more critical of the resistance as a concept, because it doesn't really achieve the goal of removing occupation. However, what the resistance has done is to say that we're not going to just take this lying down. We will fight back with everything we have. And that's signs of resistance that we see everywhere, whether it is in Palestine, whether it's in Kashmir, whether it's anywhere where people have actually said, no, we have a legitimate right to defend ourselves and fight against occupation. My family themselves have given many martyrs, to just be very open, just 4 during the genocide who were martyred. And pretty much most of them are from a resistance background. So it's something that I know very close to home. Why I don't promote it as the solution for Palestine or for any other occupations is that the dynamics are very clear. Resistance may allow you to continue your fight, but they will not remove the occupier. And that there is a role for states in this. But the reason why we don't see states playing that role is because in our minds they failed. But that doesn't mean the solution doesn't come through a state. It means that you need to challenge those who prevent the state from doing its duty.
Absolutely.
So a really good example is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's really profound if we think about it. He says, "A'lamul jihad kalimatul haq inda sultanin ja'ir." The best of jihad is the word of truth against the tyrant ruler. Why did the Prophet say that was the best of jihad?
Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah.
He didn't say the one fighting on the battlefield. He said the best was speaking against a tyrant ruler. Because it really, if you think about it, it underpins the role that ruler plays. That ruler should be the one defending you. That ruler should be the ones moving the army. And the Prophet ﷺ really didn't use armed struggle in any way until he had a state. So actually the methodology, the example that we have is actually Islam under a state. But we always envision the idea of resistance as some resistance fighters with their Kalashnikov, and they're trying their best with their homemade rockets. But actually the last defenders of Palestine were a whole army, battalions with artillery, and they defended this land. And the same can be said in many parts of the Muslim world, where the Ottomans, for example, sent even troops or navy, some of their navy ships, to the Far East to go and help them against Portuguese invaders, and to Somalia. That's the mentality of the Ottomans. Oh, we have a state, we have a military, we will use that to support our ummah. So we need to, I think, have a better or bigger vision of how do you face occupation. And the sincerity of those who've given their lives in this cause, the martyrs, should never be diminished. I mean, the sacrifices are immense, and they've given confidence back to its ummah that it lost. But to take the duty away from those who have the capability is criminal. And that's my only issue with the concept of resistance. If you stop there, you make a big mistake. You allow them to paint this narrative that resistance comes from, you know, people hiding in tunnels with Kalashnikovs and a few homemade missiles. That's not resistance. That's not what you should imagine. You should imagine a situation where Turkey, Egypt, Jordan, Pakistan can move to support their ummah. Because that's what they did. Never talk about the resistance as a solution in its own right.
That's interesting because, again, many people, Muslims as well as non-Muslims, they've romanticized the armed resistance inside Palestine without understanding that this can't be the end goal.
Exactly.
The whole point of this is not to resist, it's to end the occupation. Again, resistance may be a part of it, but there are other aspects to it as well. We did briefly talk about international law and its relevance. But I still ask the question that the ICJ did rule that the occupation is illegal and there is an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. Again, who cares and who's going to pursue that? Now, I know that we talked about that we need to step away from these conventional forms of politics and law But one of the things, we talk about liberation and freedom, but there is another aspect to peace and to peace, which is justice. How do we bring justice back to not just the Palestinians, but to all the Muslims that have suffered under various different oppression around the world, if we can't look towards the Western powers and the frameworks that they've developed?
Oh, we can see they failed miserably, right? So the UN has how many resolutions in favor of Palestine in terms of the occupation of 67? How many in favor of Kashmir against the Indian occupation? There's many. Have they ever been implemented? Have they ever been enforced? No.
So would you say that then these laws, or rather the decisions that these people are making, is very, it's putting, for want of a better phrase, putting lipstick on a pig just for show?
Yeah, it's completely just for show. It actually subdues people's, passion and actions. Oh, at least I've managed to get this ICJ judgment or ICC judgment. Who cares? Exactly. You can't enforce it. It's like doing Nuremberg trials before Hitler was deposed.
Exactly.
I mean, it doesn't work that way. You first have to remove the occupation. You have to first remove those who are committing the crimes before you can bring them to trial. So I think it actually distracts us, in my opinion. All of these are very. They distract the Ummah from its real purpose.
And try to offer them small successes and placate them that way. Yeah.
And I saw so many people so happy with the ICJ judgments and all. I honestly didn't care. It's like,
how does it change on the ground?
You're telling the people of Gaza that they're facing genocide? I mean, just look at Gaza. It's been completely leveled. You've killed hundreds of journalists, hundreds of thousands of people, at least 100,000 people. Unheard of in terms of happening in front of the world's
and that's only since over the last 2.5 years.
Yeah, exactly. Let alone tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands more. So ultimately, if you start looking to those institutions for your solutions, then you're getting distracted from your calling, really. It's not harmless, is my point. People may say, oh, it's harmless, or well, at least we're doing that. No, actually, it's not at least we're doing that, because justice comes through a system that guarantees people's rights. And as we can say, if we just use Palestine as an example in terms of that history, someone said to me yesterday, he said, it was interesting, he said, so what do you view yourself as? Because he told me his wife's Turkish, and I said, oh, actually, I've got Turkish roots as well. And he goes, so as a Palestinian, some people make that will make that claim that the Palestinians are made up of Turks and Egyptians. I said, yeah, exactly, they are. I don't see it as an issue, because you think that I'm going to fall for the Zionist attack that, it's Palestinians don't have history. The history is of the people of the land, whether they come from Bosnia, from Albania, from the Arab world, is irrelevant. Whether they're Muslim, Christian or Jew, it makes no difference. The people of the land, they live off that land. You uprooted them, you ethnically cleansed them, you murdered them, and you think you have a right to that land. It doesn't work that way. It's not about that some person has a right to that land. It's not like that when you claim that the Zionists say that they have a right to that land on some kind of promise from the Torah. That's not the point here. We're talking about the reality.
Exactly.
And that's what Umar Khattab dealt with when he entered that land. He didn't say this land is for Muslims. He actually said, I will guarantee the rights of the Christians. And that's why it was amazing when the Patriarch of Jerusalem gave Erdogan the gift of the Omri Treaty when he visited him last autumn. What a powerful move to say, look, this treaty guaranteed our rights as Christians. So this is justice. Yeah. If we really want to look for justice, look for the justice that the Christian Patriarch understands. He goes, I know that ICJ won't bring justice to Palestine. I know the Christians won't be protected by the UN, but I know who will. So, it's quite a powerful example of what people understand justice to be. One that doesn't, get affected by people's own personal interests, but by a deen that guarantees, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be just even against yourselves, your families. Yeah. So if the ruler thinks like that, if the leadership thinks like that, if the Ummah accounts the ruler on that basis, that's justice. And that's the justice for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. There is also justice that needs to be done with narrative. And I'm going to bring it back to narrative, not just because you're from Narrative House, but also for the fact that it's extremely important that we've seen the needle swing now over the last 2.5 years, that the propaganda that Israel was disseminating so rapidly, twice as fast it was being debunked by the public, not by states, but by the public.
Yeah, exactly.
So on the one side, the needle has shifted in our favor, but with that comes a responsibility. Do you feel that as diaspora, when I mean diaspora, I mean not just as Palestinians, but it is important that Palestinians are put front and center. When I mean Palestinians put front and center as narrative building for Western audiences.
Yeah.
But do you feel that there is enough how do I say this? Do you feel that the responsibility that's there, are people doing justice to the narrative that needs to be said? Or are we still trying to adopt and accommodate people from various different ideologies and sects to entertain the notion that Palestine needs to be spoken about, as opposed to represent it as according to the people? And when we talk about the people, the ideas that you're sharing with us today, is this even a prominent philosophy or ideology on the ground itself? Or are we still, because at the end of the day, we still have the PLO. And I know that most people will disagree with that.
Yeah, massively. Yeah.
But at the same time, what's the narrative on the ground? And are we doing justice to that narrative building?
Yeah, so actually one of the things I used to focus a lot on social media, especially at the height of the genocide, was telling the story from Gaza. And the story from Gaza actually is remarkably an Islamic message. It is ultimately, you have a duty, Ummah, to this cause. You know, this is not a Palestinian cause. The number of videos, and I have lost count, hundreds, if not thousands.
So it's actually coming out from the
Yeah.
ground. This isn't just
Where
Umar
are
come
you?
in London
No,
trying to...
where are you, Ummah? Where are you, oh, Arabs and Muslims? It was almost, you know, like every statement you'd hear. Where are the rulers? Where are the armies? Where are the people to come for Gaza? They didn't see this as, you know, it's good enough for you to be speaking about us. No, you have a duty towards us. So I want to be their mouthpiece. I want to support that message. Yes, there are others who have a different narrative, but I would not say that's the dominant narrative. Gaza, by the way, is unique. I do have to admit that. Gaza is not, the West Bank is not Gaza. And not to say there aren't positive indications on the West Bank and in terms of the call there. But Gaza has a very different message. Gaza believes that they are leading the Ummah in this change.
No doubt.
They don't actually believe they're resisting the occupation of the Zionists. They believe that they are trying to usher in change in the Muslim world. And when they say the victory will come, they talk about the victory of this Ummah. So they have a very different mindset. And that's quite interesting. They don't see it just as Gaza or the Palestinian cause. So I believe that message is the one that we should put front and center. Absolutely, I do believe that there's other messages out there. But I'm going to support the one that I believe in, and I believe that Islam came to promote, essentially. One that does not talk about yet another national cause. Because I don't want another national cause. We don't have to add the 55th state or whatever it is in the Muslim world. We don't need that. We genuinely do not need another weak state. So that is the message that I believe we should be promoting. And in fact, I gave a talk to a room full of mainly lefties in Birmingham about military intervention. And I said, if you look back to our history, if you look back to the history of this region, the last offenders of this region were not Palestinian. But they understood that they had a duty towards this land. We need to inspire people to have that duty. Like Salah ad-Din Ayyubi, who was a Kurd. Or like Abdul Hamid II, who was a Turk. Like Omar Khattab, who was a Hijazi. Where was the Palestinian in all of the people who liberated Palestine?
What was the reaction of the people that you said this to?
I think they were surprised. But I you know, as I said, you have to go with your message. You're not here to please the lefties, the righties, whatever. No, you're here to give a message. If you like it, like it. If you don't, it doesn't matter, because I'm not here to give a personal message. I'm here to deliver the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave for mankind. You know, this rahmah lil alameen, mercy for mankind. How is it a mercy? It's a mercy through all of its rules, through all of its culture and its systems. And that's proven in history. So how can we be the ones to add yet another failed solution to already this, you know, the pile of failed solutions? We shouldn't be those people. And that comes to understanding your deen, number one. And it gives us a very, very unique vision that the world desperately needs.
It feels that sometimes that Muslims are abstaining from the Islamic narrative of not just Palestine but other causes as well, simply because they feel that they may alienate the allies that we have. I think there should be more responsibility on those people that feel that we might alienate them by reading up on Islamic history, as you just said, and showing them that Islamic rule and Muslim leaders have been not just accommodative, but allowed those communities to thrive and flourish. So as a closing note, if you had to impart a message or a direction for the world, for the public, particularly for Muslims right now, how they should be advocating for Muslim causes, including Palestine, Kashmir, and the Rohingya, and so on. But how should they be doing this? Because a lot of the times we know what the problems are, we talk about them all the time, and we have great analysis, but strategic vision is something that we often lack. So in your strategic, and I often try to end with this, that what is your strategic vision for not just Palestine, because I know very well that you're not a nationalist, but for the Muslim world at large? What's the strategic vision?
We live in a world where, for example, racism is dominant. And I was talking about this with my Quran teacher recently. He said that the ayah in Surah Al-Rum, Allah says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لِآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالَمِينَ. That verily in the creation of the heavens and earth and the differences of your skin colours and your languages are signs for those who have knowledge. I thought, we're living in a world now, currently sitting in the UK, where we know racism is all high. The far right has got absolutely widespread across the country. There's never been more anti-discrimination and anti-racism laws than we have now. But yet, racism is at its peak. It tells you something about the failure of these systems to actually deal with root cause problems in society. But Islam, in that one verse, encapsulates that solution. Just one verse. If you understood it, it's amazing, actually. And I was telling my Quran teacher, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not saying about water, the sky, even though he mentions that in the ayah, but he's actually saying in your skin colours and languages is a sign of his creation. But yet it's a sign of our division, even as an ummah. Even colours and languages, and we're very critical. This person speaks Bengali and this person speaks it in this way and this. We're very critical. Islam has your solution. Islam has the solution for all of your problems. So if that is your objective, then you need to be at the forefront of carrying that message. So I'm not big on strategy. I believe more in doing. Because sometimes what happens is people I love these strategy documents and it's all academic.
Yeah,
but where does it come into life? It comes into life by you promoting it. Whether it's amongst your families, in your masajid, in your communities, challenging racism, challenging nationalism, challenging the lack of leadership, so that we all become voices for the oppressed, for the occupied. It has to come into real life. It's not just a nice strategy document that sits, on a computer somewhere, has been published and no one reads it. So you need to think of the examples. You need to think of the styles and the angles. In the same way that if you're promoting your business or your CV or your job or whatever it might be, or wanting to get into the best university, are you taking this seriously? Because if you do, then inshallah you're on the right side. You're on the side that did its job. Whether we brought the results, that's not in our hands.
I think you're right. Everybody has that strategic vision. We've spoken about it a lot. But strategic action, that we need to develop. And I think one of the failures that we have within our communities is that we don't have enough people that we're training to actually go off and achieve those targets. Not just train in the knowledge of what it is, but then go off and become the best examples of that vision, and then go off and work towards achieving that. May Allah give us hidayah, may He give us tawfiq, and may we achieve all the targets that we have been aspiring for. In closing, if you could repeat once more my favorite phrase that you ever said, because I really want people to understand that from an oppressed Palestinian who has given family members to the cause not of Palestine but of the Ummah, if you would remind us what that profound statement was, that at least it made me shake.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it to you in a slightly different way, because it was a really nice example that happened during the genocide. One of the resistance fighters was killed in Jenin, and he wrote in his will, he said, "Do not bury me in the flag of Sykes-Picot. Bury me with the flag of the Shahada." That encapsulates my example, or my that message, which is, how can you talk about Palestine if you then don't talk about the affairs of Kashmir and the Rohingya and the Uyghurs? And how do you prioritize one over another? I'm not saying one may not require certain attention at a time. The genocide in Gaza has been unique under any circumstances in the last few years. Never has the world witnessed a live stream genocide.
Exactly.
But does that mean that it was acceptable for you to be silent when the Rohingya being genocide? Did you ever attend a protest? Did you ever give a talk? Did you ever write anything? Did you ever speak about it in a khutbah? But you spoke about Palestine only? Then no, there's something seriously wrong. If we weren't marching for Syria and we weren't demonstrating for the Uyghurs and we weren't talking about Kashmir, something is wrong. That means we haven't understood Ummah. So that is something that we have to address. It can't be that there's only 500,000 people out for Palestine, but there was hardly anyone out for Sudan. There is something wrong, and I'm even guilty of that. But at least we should be working towards changing that, not to say, this is an acceptable situation that, as an ummah, that we're facing.
Thank you very much, my brother Omer, from Palestine, but most importantly, part of our ummah. Assalamu alaikum.